You open TikTok for 2 minutes. 45 minutes later, you put the phone down. You didn't decide to keep watching, you just didn't stop. There's a philosopher who predicted exactly this. Not in a lab, not studying algorithms, but by watching the slow collapse of human attention in modern society. His name is, listen carefully, Byung-Chul Han. And what he found is far more disturbing than addiction. In 2010, Han published a short essay called The Burnout Society. It's barely 100 pages, but it contains one of the most precise diagnoses of modern life ever written. Han's central argument is this: we used to live under what he calls a disciplinary society. External authorities, governments, bosses, churches, parents, told you what you could and couldn't do. The dominant word was must not. The cage was visible. You could point at the bars. Then something shifted. We moved into what Han calls an achievement society. The old prohibitions dissolved. No one tells you what you can't do anymore. Instead, every voice, every app, every platform, every algorithm whispers the same thing. You can. You can be anything. You can do everything. There are no limits. And this, Han says, is a new kind of violence. Because when the cage disappears, something strange happens. You don't walk free. You build a smaller cage inside yourself, and you call it ambition. The complaint of the depressive individual: nothing is possible. This can only occur in a society that believes nothing is impossible. Now think about TikTok. The platform doesn't force you to use it. Nobody locks you in. There's no subscription, no fee, no obligation. It simply appears on your phone, infinite and effortless, and invites you, constantly, gently, relentlessly, to keep going. In 2025, the average user spent 95 minutes per day on TikTok. That's more than any other social platform, more than YouTube, more than Instagram. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Most users underestimate how long they've been on it. Research confirms that TikTok distorts your sense of time more than any other app. You're not being used. You're just never leaving. Han has a name for this. He calls it auto-exploitation. You're not a victim of external oppression. You are both the warden and the prisoner. The platform gives you the infinite scroll, but you are the one who keeps scrolling. And because you choose it, because it feels like freedom, it never occurs to you to resist. This is what makes TikTok different from television, different from books, different from anything before it. Television required you to sit down at a scheduled time for a scheduled show. Books required sustained attention and physical effort. TikTok requires nothing. It is engineered to eliminate friction, every single structural element designed so that stopping is harder than continuing. And the content? 15 seconds, then another 15, then another. Han wrote in The Burnout Society about what he calls hyperattention, a scattered, restless mode of perception that jumps rapidly between stimuli, incapable of dwelling on anything. He contrasted this with deep attention, the sustained focus that allows for contemplation, for genuine thought, for what he calls profound boredom. Han argues that profound boredom, real, uncomfortable silence, is actually the source of creativity and selfhood. It's the state in which the mind stops consuming and starts thinking. And TikTok is, structurally, a machine for eliminating it. Every swipe interrupts the silence before it can begin. But Han's critique goes deeper than attention spans. In the Transparency Society, he identifies another pathology: the compulsive need for self-display. In a world where everything must be visible, where opacity is suspicious and exposure is virtue, the self becomes a performance, a product to be optimized and broadcast. TikTok is the most evolved expression of this logic ever created. Think about what the platform structure does to a creator. You record a video, the algorithm evaluates it, the algorithm decides how many people see it. You watch the numbers, you adjust, you record again, you watch the numbers again. You are no longer expressing yourself. You are optimizing yourself for an audience you can't see, using criteria you don't fully understand, in service of metrics that change without warning. Han calls this the end of the other. In his view, genuine selfhood requires encounter with what is different, strange, resistant, something that doesn't simply confirm what you already are. But the TikTok algorithm delivers the opposite. It shows you what you already like, amplifies what you already believe, and rewards the version of you that performs most effectively for its systems. The result, Han argues, is narcissistic hell, not vanity in the old sense, but a far more subtle trap. A loop of self-reference with no exit. You watch content about people like you. You create content to become a better version of the person people like you would admire. You receive validation, you optimize, you loop. The digital swarm consists of individuals who are isolated and yet who have their gaze fixed on one another. And here's the cruelty of it. The platform is designed to make you believe this loop is self-expression. The language is all about authenticity. Show your true self, be real, be vulnerable. But the algorithm selects for what performs. And performance, by definition, is not authenticity. It is the management of perception. When 82% of Gen Z adults acknowledge dependency on platforms like TikTok, we're not looking at personal weakness. We're looking at a system that has achieved something extraordinary. It has convinced over 1 billion people that consuming it and performing for it are acts of freedom and self-expression. Han calls this psychopolitics, a form of power that operates not through prohibition but through seduction, not you must not but you want to, not a cage you can see but a pleasure you can't name the cost of. The surveillance isn't external anymore. You do it to yourself willingly in exchange for dopamine. Byung-Chul Han diagnoses the wound. He is less interested in prescribing the cure. But 2,000 years before TikTok, a group of philosophers developed a framework that maps onto Han's problem with disturbing precision. The Stoics were obsessed with one question: what is actually within your control? Epictetus, born a slave, later one of the most influential philosophers in history, opened his Enchiridion with a distinction so simple it almost seems obvious until you sit with it. Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. Our judgments, our impulses, our choices, those are ours. Everything outside that boundary, not ours. The algorithm, the view count, the reaction of the crowd, not yours. The Stoics called the failure to see this distinction confusion of the spheres, and TikTok is the most sophisticated machine for inducing this confusion ever built. It takes everything that is not in your control, the performance of others, the reaction of strangers, the velocity of trends, and makes it feel not just relevant, but urgent. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, arguably the most powerful man alive in the 2nd century, wrote in his private journals every morning. Not for an audience, not for a following, not to optimize his personal brand. He wrote to clarify his own thinking, to remind himself of what mattered, to resist the noise of the court around him. He writes, "Do not waste what remains of your life in thoughts about other people when you are not thinking about them in relation to your own well-being." 1,500 years later, a German philosopher would describe the same drift as the collapse of the self into the achievement society's performance loop. Marcus Aurelius had a simpler name for it: distraction. And his prescription was just as simple and just as difficult: return to what is yours. Han, in his 2022 book Vita Contemplativa, calls for something he names the Vita Contemplativa, the contemplative life. Not productivity, not optimization, not even rest in the modern sense of recovery so you can work more. Real contemplative inactivity, the capacity to dwell, to let time unfold without agenda, to encounter silence without filling it. The Stoics had a practice for this. They called it memento mori. Remember that you will die, not as a morbid exercise, but as a clarifying one. When you hold your finite time in mind, the 45 minutes lost to TikTok doesn't feel neutral anymore. It becomes a choice. And choices, the Stoics insisted, are where character lives. Seneca wrote in the 1st century AD, "It is not that I have a little time, but that I waste a great deal of it." Replace time with attention, and you have Byung-Chul Han's entire diagnosis of social media in a single sentence. The Stoic answer to TikTok is not to delete the app, though you might. It is to first become conscious of the mechanism, to name what the platform is doing to your attention, your self-concept, and your sense of time, and then to make a real choice, not the pseudo-choice of scrolling, which is no choice at all, but a deliberate act of what Han calls a lingering. staying with one thing long enough to actually think. TikTok doesn't steal your time, it makes you steal it from yourself and feel good about it. Byung-Chul Han saw the mechanism. The Stoics saw the remedy. Neither asked you to become a monk or throw your phone into the sea. They only asked one thing: pay attention to what you're doing with your attention. That's the examined life, and it's available to you right now as soon as you put this down. If this way of thinking about the world interests you, stay. There's more where this came from, and subscribe if you want to be the first to know when the next one drops.